Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. Today, we've got the 5th session in the 2nd day, and we've got a lineup of amazing speakers. So yesterday and this morning, we learnt a lot about policy in various regions, and today we'll be learning some strategies and listen to some stories and lessons learned from 3 speakers. Sirjana Nijjar, welcome. Sirjana Nijjar is the Director of Programs at Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organizations. We've also got Adeline Lerambert. I hope I'm saying that correctly. If not, please help fix that. I have a French name, but I don't think I spoke that right. Anyway, Adeline is an international policy specialist from Born Free Foundation. And finally, we've got a speaker who won't be joining us, but he's kindly sent us his video presentation. It's Jonathon, campaigner from East Environment and Asian Society of Taiwan. So we'll begin with Sirjana, and I'll just give you a quick biography. Just a moment. Hang on a second. All right, Sirjana Nijjar is Director of Programs at Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organizations, FIAPO. It's the apex animal rights body in India. Her core areas of interest are policy change, implementation of existing laws, and influencing governments to improve animal welfare legislations. She also has a deep interest in human-animal welfare, livelihoods, disease surveillance, and scope of veterinary service for animal welfare. Sirjana holds a bachelor's degree in science, after which she pursued law at the University of Delhi. She holds a license to practice in India, and she's an ardent animal lover. She started her journey from rescuing animals on the streets. And Sirjana's work now is with different national and international animal welfare organizations focused on administration, planning, monitoring, and evaluation with special emphasis on advocacy. Her presentation today will highlight how FIAPO leveraged on a litigation filed by another animal rights organization to advocate for the implementation of laws on animal welfare in the state of Punjab. Okay, thank you, Sirjana. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Monique, and it's so nice to be presenting here. Just a second. Okay. Today's topic is how do we use litigation as an advocacy tool? And I would be elaborating on, is my screen moving?
No.
Somebody has to assign me the slide control privileges. I'm not able to move the slides. Oh, yeah, it's moving now. Yeah. So the highlight of the presentation is how to use litigation as an advocacy tool to build momentum for the government to take action and to further the cause of animal welfare. I would specifically focus on the issues where the law is present, or we have the law, we have the act, we have the rules, and for the implementation of those laws, how litigation is an important tool. If there is an existing piece of legislation which the government is not implementing, then how can litigation help? Also, it is not important that this litigation is filed by yourself or your organization, even if the litigation is filed by another organization, how can you leverage on that litigation for implementation of animal welfare laws in your area of intervention? I will be elaborating on how we did that in FIAPO in India. So we all understand, advocacy as a process that can lead to a change. Every organization can have its own definition of advocacy, which is influencing decision makers. It can be speaking up for an issue. It is espousing a specific cause. But whatever may be the definition, whatever is your definition, the purpose is always to see the change in the system, in structures, in decisions, in the policies, in how the policies are implemented, what are the practices of the government regarding those policies, what is various bodies within the government structures regarding those policies. So with advocacy, we are always seeking to shift the direction to see that how it can benefit our cause. And to advance your cause, to advance the issue, generally we use various methods. The organizations, activists, pressure groups, they'll use different methods. And for each method, there are always a specific group of people or the target audience that we want to target through our methods. And some of the common methods that we use are awareness, for which the target audience is general masses. And through general masses, how this awareness that an organization is doing, undertaking, how it reaches the decision makers. Then there is education. Again, the target audience will be a bit narrow, where we focus on institutions, schools, colleges, educational institutes, and others. And lastly is the method is lobbying. Again, the target audience will be very specific, which is policymakers and policy implementers. And all these methods are ultimately used to influence the decision makers. So if none of those methods work, what do we do? So what we did in India is file a litigation, leverage on a litigation. So if nothing works, we in India say that litigation is the last remedy for all the ills. So to move the government, to move an issue. But is it the best solution in every case? Maybe, maybe not. Totally depends on the issue, totally depends on the cause, depends on a lot of other factors. But for specifically, I'll say in India, it is generally speaking, it is best used if there is a law already in place. So the litigation which is done in the courts relates to interpretation of the laws. If there is a law in place, then it is easy to go to a court asking the court for implementation of that law. If there is no law, then it becomes a little difficult because the courts are not a proper place for making new laws. There is a separate legislative body, elected representatives who have to make the laws. So if there is an existing law in place which is not being implemented, then litigation is a solution. Second is, if there is lack of implementation, then definitely litigation can help. The scope of the litigation should be narrow. If we have a very specific ask, then it is best to litigate, and it is easy to get government or court orders for implementation of that specific law or section or act or rules. And the asks have to be very concise and clear and specific. So in those scenarios, litigation has been found to be a best solution in India. I'll take you through the hierarchy of courts in India. We have lower courts, High Court, and Supreme Court. The litigation for implementation of laws is, we call them writ petitions, and are generally, they are filed in the High Courts. You can file a litigation in the Supreme Court as well, but then you lose a chance of appealing. If the favor is not in your favor in High Court, then you can always go to a higher court, which is the Supreme Court. So we generally file litigations in the High Courts in the states, and that is, overall a best case scenario. So how did we file the litigation? Which laws were used? I'll go through that. In India, we have a specific legislation act for prevention of cruelty to animals, which is Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, very simply, promulgated in the year 1960. I'll say it is quite an ancient piece of legislation now, and the government is under process to make changes to this act and make it more robust. But for now, this is the act that we have. And under this act, we have several rules to operationalize the act. So some of the rules are, they regulate, we have pet shop rules, we have dog breeders rules, we have transportation of animal rules, we have slaughterhouse rules, and several other rules, animal birth control rules that regulate neutering of stray dogs and cats. And under this act, we have Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animal rules, which we call SPCA rules. So SPCAs in India are a statutory body, I'll say. Unlike the SPCAs in other countries, which are non-government organizations, in India, the SPCAs are government organizations with a government body at the helm of this district SPCA. And what does these rules require? The first is that there should be a functional incorporated body at district level, which means that there has to be, the structure is same like any organizations, but the main body, administrative body, are the government officials, local government officials, and then there are non-government members, which are non-official members. So that is basically the structure. And the SPCA is required at the district level to set up animal shelters, infirmaries, and SPCA also has certain powers. SPCAs can seize the animal from cruel situations. They have the power to enter a house and take the animal in case of cruelty. SPCAs can go to police stations, can file police reports. They can undertake inspections of premises where they have, if there is a cruelty complaint in case of any complaint from individual. So they have the power to inspect, to enter the premises. They can stop vehicles that have overloaded animals, and they can take animals into custody. And there are lots of other things that the SPCAs can do. So in this particular situation in India, litigation was filed by another animal welfare organization called Mowgli Aid. They filed the litigation in the state of Punjab, which is a North Indian state. I'll just show the map. Yeah. So this is a North Indian state of Punjab. This is where the litigation was filed in the High Court of the state. And the litigation was filed for the implementation of SPCA rules. So the asks were very clear, very straightforward, concise, that the state in every district in the state. So in India, the state is divided into smaller parts, which are administrative units called districts. So each district should have an SPCA. That was one of the asks. And a functional SPCA, which has a government body, government members, and civil society members. Land for the SPCA so that shelters and infirmaries can be built. Appointment of cruelty officers for the SPCAs, ambulances, and other staff, veterinarians, and etc. But these were the main asks in the petition, because this is what the SPCA needs to do as per the law of the land. So the government in this particular state of Punjab, they did not do anything to make these SPCAs functional for 20 years. So the asks were very clear that there is an existing piece of legislation which needs to be implemented. That was very clear-cut ask in this litigation. So there were several orders passed by the courts in this particular case. The court asked the government for a report on the status of SPCAs in the state. In that report, it was a comprehensive report that if the SPCA is there or not. If it is there, what is the, do they have land? Are they running shelters? Are they running infirmaries? Are they rescuing animals? Do they have proper staff? Does this SPCA have ambulances? And there are 23 districts in the state of Punjab. And there was only one SPCA, which is an ancient one, a very old one, working in one district. All other districts did not have any place, any space for rescued animals, and no structure in the district to deal with animal cruelty cases. To keep the animals, there were no shelters. There were no infirmaries in cases of overloaded animals or rescue of illegal transportation of animals. So this overall comprehensive report was submitted in the court, and court gave various specific orders to the government. And FIAPO relied on those orders to start its intervention process in the state of Punjab. So what did we do? We got those orders and we started working in a very small district of Bathinda in Punjab. We started with meeting the local administration, which includes head of a district, which is a senior government official called district magistrate. We met head of animal husbandry department in the district. We met with municipal head in the district and education officer, panchayat officer, village level head of the district, and several government departments, transportation officers. And we lobbied with them, taking the court orders with us and asking them that this is the court order and this is what they are required to do. It is often seen that certain specific legislations are not given that importance, and we see that even the policy implementers at the district level, they don't know what to do with a certain piece of legislation, how to implement it. And that is where the role of organizations like FIAPO and other local organizations come into play. So we leveraged on a litigation which was filed by another organization for implementation of these rules, SPCA rules, which were not implemented for more than 20 years. And the results were crazy because of the litigation, the government is answerable to the court on all the actions that they have taken, on the reports submitted. in the court of law. And because that report was such an adverse report, every single district administration and the government swung into action. And at that particular point, because they were under pressure due to the litigation, FIAPO was able to start its intervention and able to get all the government bodies, local bodies together to form the SPC. So in Bathinda, we lobbied, we met the administration. Over a period of 6 months, the SPCA was incorporated. The bank account was opened. There were several meetings that happened, with each meeting having very specific asks from the local bodies to have, the municipal corporation was advised to get an ambulance. There was a board resolution passed during the meeting to allocate land for the infirmaries. The animal husbandry department was directed to post their veterinarians in the SPCA. And several other things that happened over a period of 6 years. And the best part was, because of our advocacy efforts, FIAPO was added as one of the civil society members, which gave us more impetus in terms of putting the district animal welfare issues on the board meetings of these SPCs. And this is what we are currently doing now. So the result overall is that all local government bodies, because we leveraged on a litigation filed by another organization, we were able to push these local administrative bodies to come together and to functionalize the SPC in this district. And along with that, we are also carrying out capacity building efforts for other district animal welfare organizations to become members in their district SPCs, so that they can push their animal welfare agendas, district animal welfare issues in these SPCA meetings. This is one of the photographs of a meeting with a very senior government official. Sorry, it's a little blurred. But overall, I'll say that this litigation helped us without using much resources, because litigations can cause, an organization to pay a lot of money to lawyers and running around. But in this case, we did not litigate ourselves. We did not file the petition ourselves, but we were able to leverage the litigation filed by another organization to get best results for the animals in this particular state. So thank you so much with that.
Thank you so much, Sirjana. What an amazing success your advocacy on top of the litigation produced. So we have another speaker, but before that, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I forgot to do that before. My name's Monique van der Harst, and I am an advisor for the Farmed Animal Program for Animal Friends Jogja. We're in Indonesia. And one thing that resonated with me from your speech, Sirjana, was that when we are speaking with the local government, often there's a similar sentiment that, yes, please help us. We've already got the law, but how can we work on it, because we're not sure. So I think that point was really strong, that often we, instead of criticizing, we ask, how can we help? And that opens a lot more doors, I think, in our region especially. So thank you so much. We'll open for questions after the next two speakers. So please add your questions still for Sirjana if you like. We're now going on to our second speaker, and welcome Adeline Lerambert. Would you like to tell me if I'm saying your name correctly?
It's perfect, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. The floor is yours.
Okay, let me share that.
sorry. I do have a quick introduction for you. So let me just read that out while you get your screen working. So Adeline Lerambert is the International Policy Specialist at the Born Free Foundation since 2017, and she's based in the UK. Adeline's career ranges from environmental project management to the EU and global wildlife policy. Her recent work includes coordinating and amplifying the voice of animal protection organizations at the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Adeline is also involved in multiple joint advocacy initiatives with the World Health Organization and the UNODC processes, among others. She has a multidisciplinary educational background and is an alumnus of Paris Sorbonne University and Sciences Po Strasbourg, where she graduated with a master's degree in European policies and public affairs. She has a particular interest in mainstreaming wild animal welfare and biodiversity conservation into development policy. She's going to share her experience advocating for wild animal welfare and conservation at global policy forums, from evidence gathering to strategic planning, developing the right messages, forging relationships with government officials, and collaborating with relevant civil society stakeholders. She'll be giving concrete examples of her efforts to incorporate considerations for wild animals in international agreements relating to biodiversity. So I think that brings it, biodiversity, health, trade, and sustainable development. Okay, so thank you so much. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, I'm going to zoom out a bit from the previous presentation. So I think I would take this opportunity to talk about global advocacy for wildlife from my experience in various international forums over the years. Some of you might be familiar with those UN processes, others not, but in case I find it useful or informative. So first of all, a very quick word about the organization I work for, Born Free. We're mainly focused on protecting wild animals from exploitation and other threats for the species to decline and to suffer. We try to do so in different ways, so through conservation, education, animal rescue, and policy programs. We're based in the UK, and if you know of Born Free, you'll think that a big part of our work relates to African wildlife, but in fact, we also run or support a great number of projects in other regions, including in Asia, as the map you're seeing slide shows. So we work on human-tiger conflict in central India, Asian elephant conflict in Sri Lanka, and we work on a number of policy issues, for example, on long-tailed macaques or the one-horned rhino, and we support the Orangutan Foundation in Indonesia as well. So Born Free has a long history engaging in global policy influencing initiatives, in particular at CITES, which looks purely at regulating the trade in endangered and wild animals. But with the issues relating to wildlife being so closely linked with policies on biodiversity, health, environmental and wildlife crime, and sustainable development, we expanded our remit and started engaging with the likes of the CBD and the Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Migratory Species, World Health Organization, UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the Forest Stewardship Council, or the on the Sustainable Development Goals, to name a few. And we always, in our work, try and bring in considerations for animal welfare and the importance of the individual animal in those forums where such concepts are often completely off their radar or very low on the list of priority. And now this is to outline the sort of advocacy cycle that we use to develop our lobbying strategy. So in terms of our style, I would say that while we advocate from within, so always favoring constructive discussions with government officials, we always seek to obtain observer status at those forums, and we use evidence-based arguments. We also try to advertise our positions and ask through the media or the general public, that can sometimes help to cement the advocacy process. So it's a two-pronged approach. What can be challenging is that it's good to have contacts on the political side, but I sometimes find it's hard to identify the people and the civil servants who work behind the scenes and are the true instrumental players, because politicians make decisions, but it's up to civil servants to draft the documents. So I think trying to formalize those relationships with them once you identify them is important. So in a few words, the 5 key steps that we follow are as shown. So either you've identified an issue you want to tackle, or an opportunity has emerged, such as a new legislation being developed. So you gather as much information as you can, and then in the analyzing phase, you look at your resources to see if the campaign is feasible, at the nature of the process, whether it's possible for civil society to engage, who is involved, so all stakeholders, whether it be governmental, NGOs, business, other groups. Is it a crowded space, or is there a gap that my organization can fill? What are the risks? So who could be your opponents? Could the process be delayed? What is the potential timeline that we can envisage? And I think it takes probably takes an average of 6 years for a new piece of global legislation to be born from scratch. So to bear that in mind as well. And then third, if you've decided to go ahead, you start defining your goals, developing the messages, approaching like-minded organizations for partnerships, and writing your plan of action, which you then implement. So the 4th step is to reach out to decision makers, organize events, follow the formal processes, but also finding informal routes to get more intel on how your issue is progressing, and to have sometimes better and quicker impact. And finally, it's important to step back regularly to check how your issue has progressed and adapt to the evolving situation. Although it can sometimes be hard to find the right metrics to measure quality advocacy impact, but it's important. So now a bit more. I would like to present 2 examples of our global policy engagement. And the first one is at the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, which in 2018 started a process to develop the new global biodiversity framework to 2030 that would replace the 2011-2020 Aichi target. So a very broad set of goals for countries to conserve their biodiversity, both fauna and flora, and to use it sustainably.
Sorry, Adeline. So
Yeah?
can I interrupt for a second? We're just having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I'm not sure if it's your microphone somewhere, or if you could use the speaker in your computer. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. We just weren't getting the full context of what you're trying to say.
Is it any better if I hold my mic?
Not really. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a problem with that speaker. Does your desktop computer have a speaker without your headphones?
Is it any better now?
Yes, that's much clearer by the sound of it.
Right. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you for letting us interrupt. Sorry about that.
Okay, are we back on the same slide? Yeah, so, okay, back to the CBD. So, yeah, CBD was starting a process to develop the new global biodiversity framework. The evidence clearly showed that the world wasn't on track and that we needed a more ambitious and a more effective plan. And despite its conservation objective, the CBD is a very animal-centric forum where animal issues are treated from a very utilitarian approach. It's a complex forum with a huge mandate. Progressively.
Sorry, Adeline, we can't hear you at all now. I don't know if something shifted, but we could hear you at the beginning.
Okay.
Now we can hear you. When you said okay, we could hear you, but before that we couldn't hear you at all.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna carry on, and do interrupt me again if there's another issue. The CBD, despite its conservation objective, is a very anthropocentric forum, and animal issues are treated with a very utilitarian approach. It's complex. There's a lot of issues being discussed, and it's got a huge mandate. So progressively, what we did. So an NGO group was formed within the World Federation for Animals, which I joined as co-lead, having followed the process from the beginning. And we centered our messages around 3 priorities. So ensuring that not just the consumptive value of wildlife is included in the text. Also strong language on preventing extinctions and on species recovery, and the need to reduce zoonotic disease risk by integrating animal health and welfare. So we engaged with member states and proposed language for the new agreement until its adoption last December. And what we ended up with is a compromise text, which you have to be prepared for at this level of negotiations, and which does contain some ambitious elements. But sometimes the small wins are also in what was avoided. So, for instance, the reference to trophy hunting was removed, and I'd like to think that we had a role in that. But yeah, the issue we now have is to keep the momentum at political level on biodiversity, and to implement this new framework. So the plan is adopted, but NGOs need to help monitor its implementation at national and local levels. Okay.
So this is just extracts from our joint position paper to show you how we presented things using the draft UN text and a color code to suggest edits, additions, and removals of language, alongside a page with the rationale and the arguments to make the changes. And these are just a few pictures from the big biodiversity conference, COP14, last December in Montreal. It was hosted by Canada and China because it was initially due to take place in Kunming. And the second initiative that Bonfrey is engaging with is the WHO's process to develop a pandemics treaty by 2024. This process is much more difficult to infiltrate, if I can say, because the dedicated working group, drafting group, works behind closed doors, and despite having been sponsored by the UK government to have observer status in the negotiations, our ability to input is very limited. And despite the relevance of animal health and welfare to the issue, particularly in its role for preventing future pandemics, the discussions revolve around human health and social issues. So we were asking member states to address the primary drivers of zoonotic disease emergence, including wildlife trade, habitat destruction, and intensive animal agriculture. So basically asking the treaty to contribute to preventing pandemics at source. So the challenge we have is to make prevention measures seem tangible to governments, because they want results. They want to know if they're preventing a pandemic, and that's not always the case. So they want to focus on surveillance instead of investing in prevention. So the efforts by the NGO groups involved are to look at priorities of administrations and find hooks to kind of hang our arguments to. So if you can convince that more disruptions will be caused at all levels of society, so disruptions to the health or to the economy, and that you're proposing cost-effective ways and viable solutions, you've got more chances to be heard. That's the route that we're using. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is liaising with key players within regional political or economic groups, such as the EU, for instance, who have often have a disproportionate influence in those global forums, with a very united position. And another example which relates to this work at the WHO is the Asian Leaders Declaration on One Health, which is a good tool that we have as well to hold governments to account in this process. And my final slide is a recap summary of recommendations I would give to anyone looking to do or doing policy advocacy. So I don't know if I've got time to go through it, considering we've been delayed a bit, but thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Adeline. Your work is truly making a difference, and I think these steps will be of great help to all of us that are trying to make a difference in the policy sector. So without further ado, we'll go on to our next speaker, which is a video from Jonathon Tree, bearing in mind the time. And so we'll have questions and answers after this presentation. Thank you so much, Adeline. To the team, would you like to set up the video?
Yes, I would like, before I show the videos, I would like to begin first with an introduction of Jonathon. And Jonathon is a campaigner at the Environment and Animal Society of Taiwan, or EAST for short, where he supports campaign strategies, policy research, and international collaborations to improve the welfare of animals in Taiwan. In his spare time, he enjoys hiking, streaming, and crosswords. For anyone who has worked with Jonathon, you will find that he is a very friendly person. And the topic for his presentation today is it's about his work at EAST over the years, through his success and stories. So policy advocacy can seem like the final frontier for advocacy campaigns and daunting for advocates to approach. And this is particularly true in Asia, where animal issues are seldom at the top of policymakers' agendas. And his presentation will use examples from their current campaign to phase out battery cages in Taiwan, to tease the complexities of policy advocacy, drawing on their more than 20 years of policy experience. And with that in mind, I will show his video now.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to join you today at the Asia for Animals Policy Clinic. I am Jonathon Tree from the Environment and Animal Society of Taiwan, and I'm excited to be sharing, along with other fabulous speakers, about how to advocate for policy changes and some of the tools and strategies that we use here in Taiwan. So as a brief background, EAST is an animal protection organization which is dedicated to forging a new relationship between humans, animals, and the environment. And ever since EAST's founding more than 20 years ago, EAST has had a strong focus on legislation and policy advocacy. And EAST works across a broad range of animal issues with a rather strong emphasis in recent years on farmed animal welfare and animals used in research and testing. And this is just some of the policy work that EAST has done over the years, from achieving a ban on circus animal performances and introducing animal welfare guidelines for farmed animals. And today I will be using some examples in my presentation from our recent campaign, which is the Free Hens campaign. And this campaign seeks to achieve a staged phase out of battery cages in Taiwan. So I'm sure all of you are familiar. These are what traditional battery cages look like. And this is a farm in Taiwan for context. And the appeals of this campaign are to immediately achieve an end to new construction of battery cages, to transition fully to away from battery cages by 2030, and to promote animal welfare in agricultural education. So that's a bit of background for the examples I'll be using throughout the presentation. And these are the themes or the principles in our toolkit that I'll be going through today. So thorough research, understanding the motivations of everybody, all of the stakeholders, being adaptive and creative, building a wide range of relationships and forming alliances, and accumulating progress and building a foundation over time. So the first issue is the first item in our toolkit is researching the issue thoroughly. So by researching the issue thoroughly, you'll be better positioned to make the most persuasive case and have the upper hand in in your campaign and in your negotiations. So this will enable you to use information asymmetry to your advantage, because you'll be the expert on the topic and know more than the other people in the room that you're the other decision makers that you're trying to persuade. So as an example from our Free Hands campaign, we conducted thorough research before starting the campaign on the main facets involved in a transition away from battery cages, including animal welfare issues that affect laying hens, prices, any potential price impact of such a transition, if it would affect supply, the availability of land in Taiwan for this type of transition. And we did extensive research on the experiences of other countries that have gone through similar transitions and what their policy settings looked like. We use this to publish a Q&A as well, so not only to build our argument, but also and identify the most persuasive arguments for our messaging in Taiwan, but also to back up our arguments and respond to any criticisms or challenges that arose. So as part of this, we established a really comprehensive question and answer resource, which we then can use throughout the campaign to respond to any myths or legitimate concerns that members of the public or even policymakers have to these issues. And we used real data and academic sources, and especially, I know in Asia it's often hard because there's not a lot of research on certain animal welfare issues, but where we could, we found local research from local academics as well. And I think in my experience, a personal observation is this kind of groundwork is especially important in Asia, that there might be a little more skepticism of the work of NGOs among the public than in areas where NGOs have been around for a longer time, potentially because of the newness of NGOs or past scandals. So it's really critical that you're able to back up your claims when they're challenged. The second key theme that I'd like to, item in our toolkit that I'd like to bring up today is understanding the motivations of all parties. So you really have to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand where the different stakeholders are coming from. And we find that it's really difficult to make a case to someone if you don't clearly understand what they're seeking to get out of the discussion. And I think this is something that a lot of salespeople will use in their work as well, to really understand what's driving the person that you're talking to, so that you can tailor your argument to that person and that stakeholder. And in addition to tailoring your argument, this can also help you to identify solutions and common ground that both sides might be able to agree to while you're in your negotiations. And it can prevent you from putting forward appeals or demands that are unrealistic or never going to see the light of day. So some examples in our cage-free campaign. These are a few areas where we might be able to align with, for example, what the government or the industry is seeking as well. So both the government and ourselves hope for a safe food supply in Taiwan, and the government would like to align with changing public opinion and growing concern for animal welfare. In Taiwan, the majority of egg farmers are over 60, so this is a real area of fragility for the egg industry in Taiwan's food supply, and by having more better animal welfare standards, farms will be able to better placed to attract younger workers and attract more people into the industry, and have that intergenerational renewal. And finally, aligning with international trends, especially in Taiwan's position, there's a real desire to be a contributing member of the international community. And not fall behind on what other countries are doing. And in terms of standing in other people's shoes and seeing things from all stakeholders' perspectives, we were considering this from the very beginning of the campaign. So even the framing of our appeals, we don't actually say directly in our official appeals that we want to scrap battery cages. We use the wording transition to friendly egg production systems. And this is because in Taiwan's government policy settings, free-range, barn, and enriched cages are considered friendly egg production systems. So even though we don't support enriched cages, and we're at this stage only seeking a ban on battery cages, but by using this messaging and aligning with the government's current policy settings, saying we want to transition to friendly egg production systems, it makes it easier for the government to digest because it's less of a departure from their current strategy. And the third point is to stay adaptable and creative. So I think you've got to be ready to adapt your campaign and take advantage of any windows of opportunity that might arise at any time, in addition to responding to challenges in creative ways. So an example of this is early this year, Taiwan suffered a severe egg shortage. So it was so extreme, you'll even see on this story here, that someone was found to have stolen some eggs that were sitting in someone's bicycle basket. And initially we viewed this egg shortage as a real setback for our campaign because it was about the same time that we were planning to launch, and obviously everyone is only talking about how can I get eggs, how can I get eggs, and how can we make sure that the supply is stable. And so for us, we're pushing for a transition for the egg industry at this time of real volatility. We view this as a real challenge. But we approach this in an adaptive way, and we decided it was because there was so much public discussion and public discourse around the egg industry, it was a time that people were open to hearing critiques and ways that the egg industry needed to be adjusted and reformed. So we used this time to publish a critique of the current model right at the peak of the crisis and stimulate the public imagination of how the egg industry could be more resilient and how animal welfare was an important part of that. And so while the government was formulating a subsidy package for the egg industry, we worked with legislators and put out a statement and a critique of the current battery cage, open shed battery cage system that dominates the egg industry in Taiwan. And we're able to secure priority support for friendly egg production systems when the government announced its subsidies. Around the same time, the Council of Agriculture was also being upgraded to a Ministry of Agriculture, which required new legislation amendments through the legislature. And so at that time, we used this opportunity, this window of opportunity, to work with legislators who questioned senior officials in the Council of Agriculture about how they were, what their plans were for transitioning to a more humane farming system. And this enabled us to put additional pressure on this question during a debate that was really important to those officials as they upgraded into a ministry. And this point, I'm sure, is really familiar to anyone working in policy advocacy, that relationships really matter. And most importantly, those relationships should be based on trust that you've built up over time. And these relationships are important because there are some things NGOs are really well placed to do, but there are some things that allies are able to better advance your cause and better accomplish in ways that you're not able to do alone. And sometimes allies can be present in decision making and in rooms where NGOs won't be part of the conversation. So one example from our Free Hands campaign is we were able to connect through some connections with the Minister Without Portfolio, who supervises the Council of Agriculture. And through securing their support, they were able to demand that the authority produce a plan for how they intend to promote the transition to a more humane farming system. And that was combined with the legislative debate that I just mentioned, and together these two aspects meant that the Council of Agriculture committed to working and publishing a mid to long-term plan, which will detail what they will do and drive the conversation forward. And our engagement and relationships with other environmental NGOs over many years also enabled us to join a meeting with the president at a meeting for environmental NGOs and present our case for why Taiwan should move away from battery cages. And this was actually the first question and the first issue that the president opted to respond to when she made her responses. And you can see here, she expressed her distaste for battery cages and hoped that the authorities will accelerate the transition, which is a powerful symbolic support. And as part of this campaign, we also formed a formal coalition of allies. And I think this is really important because not only can they help to spread and share your campaign, but I think it really presents a united front that can appeal to more diverse stakeholders and show that it's not just animal protection groups that care about this issue. So we have groups that are representing, for example, the school nutrition organizations and veterinarians and legislators and farmers and media figures and influencers, people working in retail, lawyers. So it really brings together a really diverse segment of society and shows that this is a campaign that matters to a whole range of different people and different stakeholders. And lastly, I think it's important to remember that policy work is slower and that whether it's legislative work or policy work, it requires a lot of consultation from the government with different stakeholders, and it seldom moves quickly. And I think this is especially the case in Asia, where you might be starting from scratch and building the foundations of awareness and of your campaign. So it really requires a great degree of patience and persistence, and I think from a self-care perspective, it's really important to keep that in mind when you're doing your work. That it takes a lot of time to build connections, to generate that public support, and to overcome the reservations or the objections that other stakeholders might have. And I think you can see in Taiwan, we actually first mentioned this issue right back in 2007 and began campaigning more on the issue of battery cages around 2012 when the EU released implemented its ban on battery cages. And you can see over time we've gradually had voluntary guidelines and then had those guidelines be given legal basis with mandatory labeling for those higher welfare systems, and then mandatory stamping of all housing systems, including conventional cages, just in 2021. And the original guidelines have also been strengthened during that time as well. So you can see that these changes, they really build on each other, and even it feels like you might not get everything you want, they really do build on each other over time and add up and enable you to push for more ambitious changes in the future. And this is just a news clipping from right back in 2012 when we really first started actively pushing this issue. And my colleagues, here is our director Yumin and our founder Ruhong. They tell me that one of their biggest achievements is actually building up that awareness among decision makers, which is now translating into more substantive process. So even though at the time, change was really gradual, the fact that those attitudes are changing among the decision makers and the policy makers, and now those people are in positions of power, it really enables the whole system to move forward at a faster pace. So I think it's important to remember that you won't reach your desired goal in one step, but you should keep in mind that you are building the foundation for future progress in your country. And to sum up, by all means, the momentum that we have achieved on this campaign that I've used as an example is far from enough, as the majority of hens still live in battery cages in Taiwan. So there's still a long road to go before battery cages are abolished. But on a more positive note, I think that farm animal welfare is a really new and evolving field, and there are lots of changes happening across Asia and lots of exciting work being done. And I think that there's so much space to explore new strategies and learn from one another's experiences to find out what works and continue to refine our strategies and tactics that are suited to an Asian context. So thank you all for listening to my presentation, and thank you so much for Monique for moderating, and for Asia for Animals for putting together this event. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to Jonathon too, though he's not here. And thanks to Prudence for introducing him at the beginning. So we're up to question time, though I don't know how much time we've got. We have several questions, so let's get straight into it. I guess, Prudence, you'll let me know when we should finish. So firstly, we've got a question for Adeline from Brooke. Within the CBD and others like it, are you sensing any sort of shift towards the recognition that animal welfare is important and intertwined, or just as much resistance as ever?
Yes, I would say that there is a strong sustainable use narrative that is really embedded in this forum, unfortunately, so we're trying to shift the interpretation of sustainable use from an economic perspective that is used at the CBD to an environmental interpretation of sustainable use, and changing the perceptions of animals, always, talking about their multiple values for ecosystems, for health, and for their own sake. Now, the progress that we're seeing is fairly slow, and in the global biodiversity framework, it's not, you won't see a direct reference to animal welfare. However, there is a parallel process at the CBD. One of its subsidiary bodies, SubSTA, is developing a global action plan on biodiversity and health. We've managed to integrate animal welfare considerations in this initiative, which I think is a big step forward. It's still in a draft form. This global action plan on biodiversity and health is meant to be adopted at the next meeting. Yeah, I think this is good to see, but there is a lot of resistance in this forum.
Okay, thanks, Adeline, and thanks to Brooke for the question. So yeah, there's some positive movement, I guess. The next question is from Ruli to Sirjana. His question is, can you tell us about the regulation implementation and law enforcement in India? Let me just move down. Okay, so a little bit more about the regulation implementation and the law enforcement. Perhaps just in a short short description.
Yeah, so as far as the regulation and law enforcement for animal welfare is concerned, I would say it is not so simple and easy. Even in the cases of animal cruelty, and when we go to file police complaints, it is a very tedious process due to the fact that often the police officers don't know, the sections they have to book a person under. And that is where organizations go and talk to the police departments. Second is that in Indian context, it is often difficult to file a criminal case. So when you go and file, first information report, which is, in the police station, it is a criminal case. So it is difficult, to do that for an animal. It might take 3 days, 4 days, 10 days. And you might have to knock at several doors before you get a police complaint filed. Under the PCA Act, as I said, there are several rules. Again, these rules are not implemented in, in actual sense. If you follow the government on a particular set of rules and you push and you write and you go after them, you can get them implemented. But it is a time-consuming process in India, and you can see, my presentation was about the implementation. For 20 years, they did not implement a set of rules that were supposed to be implemented. So it is challenging, and that is why I said, when awareness, lobbying, networking, education, everything failed, litigation was the one that worked.
Okay, thank you so much, Sirjana. I think that's a problem with many of the countries on this side of the world, and probably others. So it's actually really great to hear that, not great that it's happening, but reassuring that we can share strategies on those kinds of issues that come up in most of our countries. All right. I'm sorry, but the time has run out. So thank you both for having one question each, and any questions that you have asked will be sent to the speakers. And thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Prudence. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Monique, Sirjana, Adeline, and Jonathon for the wonderful presentations. And we now will move to 1 or 2 minutes break before the start of the next sessions. I'm sorry to go a little bit over time with these sessions, and we'll begin in around 2 minutes.